By 326 BCE, Alexander the Great had conquered more than any Macedonian king before him: Greece, Egypt, Persia, Central Asia. He had crossed deserts, mountains, and empires. But now, at the edge of the Indian subcontinent, he faced something different. Not another Persian army, not another fortress, not another rebellious satrap. Across a swollen river stood King Porus, a ruler who refused to bow, a ruler with infantry, cavalry, chariots, and most terrifying of all, war elephants. For Alexander's army, these were not just animals. They were moving towers of panic. Horses feared them. Men had never fought them. And Porus placed them like a living wall between Alexander and victory. This is the Battle of Hydaspes, Alexander's last great battle, and the moment when the world's most famous conqueror discovered that even victory could feel like warning. Alexander had not reached India by accident. After destroying the Persian Empire, he pushed east through Bactria and the Hindu Kush, then moved into the Punjab. Some local rulers chose alliance. One of them was Ambi, known to the Greeks as Taxiles, ruler of Taxila. Ambi welcomed Alexander, but his neighbor, Porus, did not. Porus ruled the land between two great rivers, the Hydaspes, today's Jhelum, and the Assassines, today's Chenab. He was not the richest king Alexander had faced. He was not the ruler of the great kingdoms farther east, but he controlled the next door, and he would not open it. Alexander demanded submission. Porus refused, so Alexander marched to the river, and Porus waited on the opposite bank. That was the first smart move of the battle. Porus knew the river was his ally. The Hydaspes was wide, fast, and dangerous. Seasonal rains and melting Himalayan snow made it even harder to cross. A direct crossing under enemy eyes could have been suicide. Porus did not need to chase Alexander. He only needed to stop him from crossing. Alexander studied the problem. On his side, veterans of years of conquest, the companion cavalry, the Macedonian phalanx, light troops, archers, scouts, commanders who had followed him from the Aegean to the edges of India. On the other side, Porus, waiting, watching, ready to smash the Macedonians the moment they entered the water. Alexander could not simply build a bridge in front of him. He could not casually ford the river. He could not let Porus know where the real crossing would happen. So Alexander did what he had done so many times before. He turned the battlefield into theater. Night after night, he moved troops along the riverbank. He made noise. He created false alarms. Porus responded at first, shadowing him from the opposite bank. But eventually, the pattern became boring. Another Macedonian movement, another fake crossing, another night of nothing. This was exactly what Alexander wanted. He was training Porus to ignore him. Then came the night of the real crossing. Alexander left part of his army under Craterus near the main camp, visible enough to keep Porus uncertain. Then he took a strike force upstream. The weather helped him. Rain, thunder, darkness. The sound of the storm covered the sound of movement. According to ancient accounts, Alexander found a crossing point far upstream, hidden from direct view. Some modern reconstructions place the crossing near the wider Jhelum region, though the exact battlefield remains debated. The Macedonians crossed, but even here the operation almost went wrong. They reached what they thought was the far bank. It was not. It was an island. They had to continue across another channel before finally reaching Porus's side of the river. Imagine the tension. Men soaked in rain. Horses nervous. Armor heavy. The enemy somewhere nearby. If Porus had struck at the right moment, Alexander's force could have been destroyed before forming, but Porus did not fully believe the news at first. A large Macedonian force was still visible across from him. That was the trick. Was Alexander really across? Was this another feint? By the time Porus knew the truth, Alexander had a foothold. The river had been beaten. Now Porus had to fight. Porus sent a force under his son to stop the crossing. This first clash went badly for the Indians. The rain had turned the ground into mud. Chariots, powerful on firm terrain, became clumsy and vulnerable. Porus's son was defeated and killed. Now Porus faced a terrible choice. If he stayed where he was, Alexander could move behind him. If he attacked too fast, Craterus might cross from the original Macedonian camp. If he divided his army, he risked being destroyed in pieces. Porus chose battle. He marched toward Alexander, and he brought the elephants. Porus arranged his army around his strongest weapon. The elephants were placed in front of the infantry, spaced like living towers. Behind them stood foot soldiers. On the wings were cavalry and chariots. It was a frightening formation. To a Macedonian horse, an elephant was not just a bigger animal. It was a nightmare. The smell, the noise, the size, all of it could break cavalry discipline. Porus understood this. He wanted Alexander's cavalry kept away from his center. He wanted the elephants to disrupt the phalanx. He wanted the Macedonians to feel, perhaps for the first time in years, that they had entered a battlefield built against them. And Porus himself did not hide at the back. He fought from an elephant, tall, visible, royal, a king above the battlefield. Alexander saw the danger. A direct attack into the elephants could be disastrous, so he attacked the wings first. He used cavalry pressure to pull Porus's forces out of balance. Alexander led attacks on one side. Coinus, one of his commanders, moved against the other, eventually threatening the Indian rear. Livius describes this as a decisive cavalry movement. When Porus shifted forces to answer Alexander, Coinus struck the weakened side. This was classic Alexander. Do not hit strength head-on. Pull it open, stretch it, dislocate it, then crush it from the angle it cannot protect. But Hydaspes was not easy. The elephants did what elephants do. They smashed men. They terrified horses. They disrupted formations. The Macedonian phalanx, usually a machine of long spears and discipline, now faced huge animals that could trample through ranks and throw the whole line into chaos. The battle became brutal, not elegant, not clean. A grinding fight of cavalry charges, arrows, spears, mud, screaming animals, and men trying to survive beneath them. The Macedonians adapted. They attacked the mahouts, the elephant drivers. They harassed the animals with arrows and javelins. They used long sarissas to keep them away where they could. Slowly, the elephants became less a controlled weapon and more a danger to everyone. Wounded elephants panicked. Driverless elephants lost direction. Some turned back into Porus's own lines. The same wall that had protected the Indian infantry began to crush it. Meanwhile, Alexander's cavalry pressure tightened. Porus's army was now being hit from multiple sides. The cavalry was collapsing. The infantry was trapped between Macedonian weapons and panicked elephants. Still, Porus fought on. Wounded, exhausted, and surrounded, he refused to break easily. That is why this battle stayed famous, not because Alexander won quickly, but because Porus made him pay for it. Eventually, the Paurava army was defeated. Porus was wounded and captured. Then came the most famous exchange of the entire campaign. Alexander asked him how he wished to be treated. Porus answered, "As a king." Whether the exact words are perfectly preserved or polished by Greek writers, The meaning is what mattered. Porus had lost. But he had not begged. He had fought like a ruler, and Alexander respected that. Instead of executing him, Alexander restored him. He made Porus a satrap, a regional ruler under Macedonian authority, and even expanded his territory. This was not just mercy, it was politics. Alexander was thousands of miles from Macedonia. He needed local power. He needed order. He needed someone strong enough to govern the frontier. Porus, defeated in battle, became more useful alive than dead. In that sense, Porus lost the battle but survived the conquest, and that may have been his own kind of victory. After Hydaspes, Alexander wanted to go farther. Beyond the next rivers lay even larger kingdoms. The Nanda Empire waited in the east, with rumors of vast armies and more elephants. But Alexander's men had reached their limit. They had marched for years. They had fought Persians, Sogdians, mountain tribes, and now an Indian king with war elephants in the monsoon. They had won again. But victory no longer tasted like destiny. It tasted like exhaustion. At the Hydaspes, today's Bees River, the army refused to go on. This was the line, not drawn by an enemy, drawn by Alexander's own soldiers. The conqueror, who had never been stopped by Persia, Egypt, or Central Asia, was stopped by the men who had followed him there. Hydaspes had shown them what lay ahead: more rivers, more rain, more elephants, more kingdoms, more war. And so Alexander turned back. Britannica notes that Hydaspes effectively marked Alexander's farthest advance into the Indian subcontinent. The Battle of Hydaspes is often remembered as another Alexander victory. But that is too simple. Yes, Alexander won. He crossed a dangerous river under impossible conditions. He outmaneuvered Porus. He defeated elephants with adaptation and discipline. He captured the king. But Hydaspes was also a warning. It showed that Alexander's army was not endless. It showed that India would not be conquered by legend alone. It showed that every mile east came with a greater cost. And it gave history one of its most compelling defeated kings. Porus, standing against the most successful conqueror of the ancient world, did not vanish into shame. He became the man who made Alexander hesitate, the man who showed him the next world would not fall easily, the man who lost but still demanded to be treated as a king. Hydaspes was not Alexander's biggest battle. It was not his most famous, but it may have been his most revealing. At Granicus, he was the young invader. At Issus, he broke Darius. At Gaugamela, he shattered Persia. But at Hydaspes, he reached the edge of ambition. A river in flood, a king who would not bow, elephants in the rain, and an army that, after winning, finally looked east and said, "No more." The Battle of Hydaspes was a victory, but it was also the beginning of the end of Alexander's march. Because sometimes the battle you win is the battle that tells you how far you have truly gone.